Hello, everyone. All right. Somebody needs to fix this clock in front of us. It's way out of time. Welcome to everyone once again to the Peaceful Solution Character Education Certification courses. All of you in the auditorium can be seated. Welcome all of you that are watching online. And once again, we're going to be picking up in the Peaceful Solution Building Moral Excellence unit, which is the high school unit. It's the character unit. And of course, it helps us to continue in building upon the junior high unit. And as we always like to remind everyone, if you're watching on Facebook, you can download this book for free, along with all the junior high series. They're already up there for you to download. And once you download them, a lot of people have been asking us for programs where you can search the books. Well, those are searchable. You can actually download them and you can search topics in them. You can download them to your phone. I have a phone that I have all the books on, and I can open up the file and type in a word and search everywhere that word is at. And it helps a lot when you're trying to pull information. It's very difficult to remember where each and everything is at in every book. So it helps a lot when you're having a discussion, if you're doing a presentation. And of course, you don't search on your phone during the presentation. You prepare it before that. And of course, get all of those things set and prepared. And then that will help you to be able to be a more effective teacher. And of course, all of you that are being certified, you really need access to those things. And for a lot of you I know that are watching through the Peaceful Solution app, or you might be watching through other apps and you're looking for these things, but you don't have social media, just email us if you don't have them, and we'll be more than glad to send them to you. There's no reason for anyone not to have them. They're free. And you're welcome to print them. This is the actual files we use to print books in other countries if they speak English. If not, we use different languages, but that's what we use. And we want everyone to have everything that's possible to help them and to get those things set. I think he already reset that. He came down and done it. But once again, here we're going to be picking up, if everybody be turning over to Lesson Plan 5, page F. And once again, take advantage of the technology that's before us. I want to show you something. Somebody asked me, I had made mention last time how you can travel anywhere and talk. So I wanted to show, we can show the overhead real quick. These are some of the things that we use. This right here, this is what I use when I travel, if I have a business meeting or if I have a meeting with a Peaceful Solution. I can translate into 74 different languages. They work really well. I would put this one in my ear. Someone would put that one in their ear. You connect them to your phone and you speak, and it translates in whatever language you're wanting to translate in. So, technology has made things much more simple. You can actually use things like this to have a phone conversation. You can use things like this to actually teach a class, and they'll actually translate it over. Of course, you would want to have someone that can speak the language if you're going to do an official presentation. But if you're there just to have a meeting to kind of give a ideal to people, there's technologies that can be used. And I only show that because there's a lot of people that were asking about it when I mentioned it. It's a technology that it's not that expensive. I have two different sets. One is like an earbud you put in. They're great for conversation. They're not great for presentation. And they're really, they're not necessarily that expensive. If you're going to do something professional, you'll want to spend some money to get a nicer pair. But those are things that are available to us. We have a lot of things that we try to use in getting these things done. We're currently looking at translating the Peaceful Solution in 2 more different languages. And these things are a challenge. But once again, if people will email us and let us know what languages they're looking for, we try our very best to do everything we can to get these classes in every country possible. And we don't want language barriers to be something that prevents the Peaceful Solution from being taught in different countries. And if you're out there and if you're taking these classes online, or if you're even sitting in the auditorium, I know there's a couple people I see right now that speak multiple languages. And they're helping already with the program in the languages they can speak. If you can speak multiple languages and you're fluent in them, by all means, let us know, because we have things we would want you to do if you're willing to help spread this program to everywhere we can get it into. And I tell you, it's not that hard to get this program going in countries. I know for on-hand experience how easy it is to get these things going in countries. It is not difficult because people truly want a better life. And there's things we're going to get into tonight that I'll talk about. I just seen it the last week. I was in the middle of nowhere last week. I mean, when I say nowhere, I mean the middle of nowhere. And we established 2 more schools. These things are readily desired by people. People truly want to learn these things. And as I tell them, they're always asking, well, how do we learn? Well, you're going to need a teacher. And trust me, we're training teachers, and we have people that are qualified. And those of you that are sitting here in this auditorium, you won't always be sitting on that side of it. Very, very soon, you're going to need to be sitting on this side of it. And you're going to be teaching everything that you've learned in these classes, all of your notes that you've had, you're going to be using them. And it's going to be very important because there are a lot of people. We just opened up one school that a whole city will be attending. I just went to a school that we established last year, and I had to tell them to slow down on adding students. I told them, you're growing too quickly. You went to 600 in just a matter of months. So we need more teachers. And that's going to be, technology. We already do a lot with certain things such as Skype and other venues. We're streaming this across the world right now. We have certified teachers in other countries that help us a lot, but we truly need more teachers. And that's what letting everybody know in advance in the next few months, be prepared to start sitting on this side and be prepared to start teaching a lot of people. And do it just like we do it here. Just have a conversation. That's all it is. When you're teaching someone, we tend to think we have to tell the whole program in 5 seconds or less. We've spent 4 years, we in their 5th year now, we haven't even covered 5 books or 6 books yet. So you don't have to rush through it. You just have to take your time and lay it out. And that's what we're doing here with the Peaceful Solution, laying these things out. But truly, there's a lot of people asking for these classes. And there's people sitting in here right now that are already teaching classes that they got certified through our last certification class. They're already teaching. I'm looking at a gentleman right now that teaches a class in Africa, actually. And we've had people to teach them other places. And this is an ongoing class. It takes place every week. And we have other people that are teaching places like Canada. We have classes for people in the United States that want extra classes. All of those things are available. So if you're interested in getting involved quickly, like in the next 2 weeks, get with myself, Catan, David, or William, and we'll get everything set up because we really need to get these things going. But you won't teach anything that you haven't been to a class to be certified for. We wouldn't stick you out teaching the workplace manual when we haven't covered it yet. We'd have you teaching what you've already learned. And we'd put you with someone also so we wouldn't throw you out there by yourself. Something that would be comfortable for you. That's the way we all started, and that's the way it's helped us. We've all grown together. None of us grew by ourselves, but we've grown together. So with that in mind, and that'll actually tie into our class tonight we're going to go through, looking over to Lesson Plan 5, page F, and we're going to be looking over to Procedure 3. This is where David, he started it, and he got kind of midway through it, and we're going to go back and kind of rehearse that part of it so we can tie these things in together. And he talked a lot about the interdependency. And he really went through describing that through the notes of the teacher and actually telling how important these things are. And we should be able to see on a global scale how interdependent we are on each other in a total view of the world, not just independent as the United States or the state of Texas, which is where we're in, or Taylor County or Callahan County, which is the county we're in right now, but as the world, mankind in general. That's truly what the Peaceful Solution ties it together with. You can take, and I'll be as direct as I can with this, you can take color of skin and throw it out the window. You can take nationalities, throw it out the window. You can take anything that someone is using to separate or to divide mankind or the human race and throw it out the window. When we look at each other, we should look at each other with value another human being has the same value as myself, regardless of what country they come from, regardless of what education you think they have or don't have, regardless of how wealthy or how poor they might be. All of those things are irrelevant. And that's how we truly need to start seeing each other, is everyone has as much value, as myself. The author of The Peaceful Solution used to say, look at everyone else as though they have more value than you do. That way you never treat them in a very derogatory way. And, sometimes in situations, though, it doesn't always work out when you're trying to help people. But there's a lot of people that are willing to do this, an enormous amount. But here in Procedure 3, it says, have students turn to pages 181 through 183 in their handbooks and read the section entitled Introduction and One Thing Leads to Another. Draw your students' attention to the article on the Washington sniper as an example of how one person's behavior can affect others. Ask students for other examples in history of a ripple effect of fear or violence because of the choices of one or more persons. So once again, your class is going to, by asking that, depending on how old your class is, you're going to get a lot of information. If your class is very young, well, they're not going to have much history there that they're familiar with. But the older people are, the more they've seen. And once again, here you see other examples include the bombing of the federal building in Oklahoma, the destruction of the Twin Towers in New York on September 11, 2001. Stress that because our interdependence, choices will make and affect others. And there's someone texting me right now asking if I have a class ready for their country. So it's amazing how fast this program can grow. So looking over here to chapter 5, and just rehearse a little bit of what David covered, and then we're going to continue on. And of course, this is chapter 5, Character, Society, and the World. And at the very top, it says, we can change the character of society one individual at a time. And that's truly how we're looking to do it. And it starts just like with the development of respect. It starts with ourselves. That's truly what we're working on, is ourselves first, and then it goes outwardly. We can't look at other people and think how much they need to change. We need to be able to change ourselves. And then we can start helping others. It's kind of like when you're in the airplane. And they tell you if the mask drops down, put your mask on before you put the mask on the child sitting beside of you. Otherwise, you might not have it. Well, it's the same way with this. Before we can go out and start educating others, we have to educate ourselves. And one thing that you enjoy about working with a community, because here we have a whole community that's training to do this. And it's really nice when the Peaceful Solution is able to have a community, because you work together. You get to know each other's, the quirks of each other, because all of us have them. All of us have something we need to work on. There's no one that doesn't, and you get to, you find out you push each other's buttons a little bit, and then you get to see how much you've learned and how well it works. That's the true test. And of course, this is the best community in the world to live in. So it doesn't get much better. And if you think it's bad, man, we'll get into it in a little bit, and you see how bad it really is. Continuing here, it says, have you considered how many people you interact with on a daily basis and how many interact with you? Did you talk to anyone on the way to school, in the hallway, or in your classes, or on your way to work, or as you were having lunch? Think about all of these activities you've done today, or you have done today, and think about how much you interacted with those people. You might have nodded your head or looked at someone and smiled. How did your interaction affect them? How did theirs affect you? Now, not just a nod and a smile, but what about rolling your eyes and turning away? Or, here in Texas, people will give you the number 1 sign a lot if you're driving down the road. That's pretty common in the United States, period. And all of these things, think about, how did you react and how did this take place? We already covered in the last chapter of how small words play an importance in conversation. It's more about the body language, the tone of voice, and how these things are presented and come across. Continuing on, it says, not only are we constantly interacting with others, but we also depend on and need each other for many things. You depend on your parents or guardians to care for your needs, and they depend on you to be respectful, helpful, and to mature into productive adults. You depend on your friends to be trustworthy and caring, and they depend on you to reciprocate those same feelings. You depend not only on your friends and family, but also on people you do not know personally. For example, you depend on the bus driver to be punctual. You depend on the supermarket and the stores to have products you need, and that's just to name a few. The process of interacting and mutually needing others is called interdependency. And I learned something this past week where how you can be everybody in a certain area can be interdependent on something. And if that thing doesn't work, it messes everything up. And if you've ever been to the Dallas Fort Worth International Airport, you know there's many terminals, A, B, C, D, and E. And when you need to go from one terminal to the next, you can't just walk from terminal B to terminal E. It's impossible. You have to take the SkyTrain. Well, this last week, I was there with a lot of other people, and guess what broke down? The SkyTrains broke down. And everybody's watching airplanes taking off like, yep, there goes my flight. Yep, there goes my flight. And I was very thankful because I was sitting there thinking, if it's broke down for me, I hope it's broke down for the pilot of the plane that's supposed to be flying that I'm going to be on. Because I was getting ready to come back to Abilene. And lo and behold, after 45 minutes and thousands of people gathering to try to get on the SkyTrain, so you knew if you got on it, you got your one opportunity to go where you were going, and then you were going to wait a long time to get back on it again. It was great because I got on it, got off, got to my plane that was supposed to depart an hour before that. And lo and behold, one of the people that were supposed to be working in the plane was stuck in the same situation. So at least my flight, I made it. But a lot of people were not able to make it because something broke down and everybody depended on it. And it threw everything into confusion. And of course, they don't stop flights just because you're not at the gate to board. They just take off. And there's a lot of people that got stuck there overnight. And I can only imagine with all the people I've seen, a lot of people were upset. And they were all depending on this thing to work. And it didn't work. And a lot of people voiced their displeasure, screaming at each other. I was glad to have gotten out of there because things were starting to get really, really heated amongst the people that were there. And I really thought about it. I thought about complaining about it, but I thought I've traveled through this airport hundreds of times. I've never been glad that it worked, so I shouldn't be upset that it didn't work this one time. But I've seen how many people, when something didn't work, they couldn't depend on it, became extremely upset. And I really started thinking, I wonder if they are okay when someone gets that upset with them because they didn't do their jobs. They didn't fulfill what they're supposed to do. Because these people are acting like this is life or death. Worst case scenario, they're going to stay a night, in that city. And that can be disruptive. I understand. It can be frustrating. I didn't want to do it myself, but if I didn't have a choice, that's what I would have done. But the people, the anger that they had and the way they voiced it, I can imagine that they don't get that way with themselves when they do that. And that's where we have a breakdown in society. We don't look at things on a level playing field. And one thing we have to understand, if we as human beings, who are supposed to be the smartest species on the face of this earth, if we can break down, not be punctual, do things that are inappropriate, cause mass havoc in other areas ourselves, we shouldn't be yelling at machines that run on oil and electricity and gas. The brains that are supposed to take care of them are the human beings, and things break down. So think about that. Next time you go to throw the chainsaw across the field and you might hit someone, or the next time the car breaks down. I know of a mechanic right now I don't want to look at because I know every time that poor guy, he's constantly working on vehicles. It's like raising the dead. In fact, I see two of them right now that do the same thing, and I'll be honest with you. I'm not a mechanic because I can't do it. I don't have the patience to do it. It's a challenge when you fix one thing and the next one breaks. Well, think about that just as an example as we continue going through this, because this interdependency that David talked about, and I encourage everybody to go back and watch that class again, and how we perceive ourselves. When things go wrong, do we view it the same way as we view it when things go wrong that others are in control of? Are we frustrated with ourselves, or do we, as the author of the Peaceful Solution spoke about, and I've given this example many times, when your daughter drops your most honored glass and it hits the floor and breaks, and it's like, oh, I can't believe it. There's no other glass like that on the face of the earth. That's the only one. And then, of course, you go get another one, and of course, this is his story he told. He dropped it the very next day after chewing her out. He dropped that glass, and he said it was almost like it took 3 minutes for that glass to hit the floor. He had a conversation with himself, and he said to himself, I can buy another one. It's not that important. It'll just hit the floor, and it's going to break. But you know what? It's okay, because I can go buy another one. And he said he learned a lot from that, because he learned how quickly he forgave himself and how just totally irate he was when someone else did it. And, we learn from things like that. And that's the important part, is that we learn from things like that we don't continue to do it. So, and the author of the Peaceful Solution, that he was a person that could connect with anyone. He was able to tell stories that he lived a long life, and he was able to communicate his experiences with others, and they were very naturally told, because he was just honest about how life was. And he was able to connect with thousands of people in many different countries, because everybody experiences the same things. It doesn't matter what language you speak or what nationality you are. We all have frustrations. We all are interdependent. And let's continue. We'll get into some more topics as we go about interdependency and how important everyone sitting in this room depends on each other. Truly do. And you're getting ready to find out how much a lot of people in this world depend on you that are sitting right there in those seats out in this auditorium right now. Because there's a lot of people that are looking forward to these classes. I mean, literally got a message 20 minutes ago or 15 minutes ago, whatever it was, somebody asking if the class is ready for their country. Continuing on here, it says, whether you are aware of it or not, we depend on and need others within our society far more than we realize. We need others to provide us with the products and services that we have grown accustomed to, and to abide by the laws that govern behavior and conduct. We depend on others to interact morally, justly, and fairly. For instance, when you are driving, you depend on those who share the road with you to follow the traffic rules and to drive with caution and consideration. If everyone followed the traffic rules, driving would be safer and there would be fewer fatal accidents. The traffic laws are only one example of how we depend on others to interact lawfully and morally. And when you think about this, here in the United States, we have, we have a very nice system when it comes to traveling with cars. We have an extremely nice way things are set up. Now, we also have an extremely quick way of getting fines and citations and tickets and toll fees and things that will take your picture going underneath traffic lights. And we kind of don't like those things. But I can imagine living somewhere to where you have cars and you have motos. They're not really motorcycles like we have here, but motos. And imagine there's two different rules for them. The cars have to obey the traffic laws like we do here, but the motos don't have to. They're allowed to go in between the cars. They can go up on the sidewalks. They can go wherever they want to. They don't have to stop for traffic lights. If the light's red, they can look and they can go. Imagine what it would be like to live in something like that. And if you really want to see chaos, you can go to YouTube and just search intersections in India. But you know what? They have less accidents than we have in the United States. I remember myself and David and Catan and a few others, we went to, and William, we went to Argentina one time. And we learned in Argentina, traffic stop signs there, they have para. They're just the ornament that sits on the road. Nobody uses them. But the one thing that we realized, and this is very different in the United States, there blowing a horn is a courtesy. Here, blowing a horn gets people irate and mad at you. But in those countries, it's a courtesy. And when someone comes up to a stop sign, they're actually looking at the other drivers to see what they're going to do, and they make eye contact. And they literally interact with each other that way. and they won't even stop. They just continue right on through, and off they go. And I asked one of the drivers, how do you not wreck? He says, you're always interacting with the other drivers. He said, in America, you guys are doing this. He said, we don't do that. I was impressed this last week when I seen somebody doing that on a motorcycle, literally driving on a motorcycle doing this. I thought, boy, he won't live to see his next year of life. But the only reason I bring that up is because the interdependency that we have in just body language alone and how we can communicate. Because here you have countries that do this, literally driving cars, traffic, and going. And everyone that's traveled, I remember the author of The Peaceful Solution was telling me when he went to Rome, that was the craziest driving he had ever experienced. And, you know, I've never been to Europe, but I can imagine what it would be like, because I've been to places where it's not like, you would think everybody's out there to have fun. They're not driving somewhere, just everybody's out there and they're all going as fast as they can and as crazy as you can go. But it's not really that way. It's just, it seems like chaos. And once again, I encourage everyone, if you're a teacher, you know, don't take the children, tell them to go to YouTube, but have them search, you know, intersections in India and things like that, because it looks like mass chaos. But it all works because there's an understanding that people are using there. You can have rules, stop signs, stop lights. You can have all of those things you want. But unless everyone adheres to those rules, someone's always going to get hurt. So the stop sign itself isn't what keeps people safe. It's the people having respect and understanding how things are working that keep people safe. The stop sign is just the reminder of the rule, and that they're important and they're needed. But if someone doesn't keep the rule, then there's danger, there's harm. And of course, one person's interdependency upon another. I know David mentioned about people dying in drunk driving accidents, you know, and how it affected his life. And I know a lot of people that suffered because people have broken rules and did not care for society, and it's cost people their very lives, you know. And I know there's people that have done these things and they say, I'm sorry. And I don't say that they're not sorry. I don't say that they don't feel bad about it, but there's nothing you can do to bring that person back once the life's been taken. You know, that's pretty final. And we could all fall into that. Each and every one of us could. So think about that with this interdependency and how it's really life or death. It truly is. Continue on. It says, can you imagine what it would be like if no one complied with the laws that kept us and our possessions safe? You know, just imagine what it would be like. Well, let's read a little bit further and we'll talk about some stuff. We could be in constant fear of being harmed or robbed. Activities we now take for granted, such as walking outdoors, going shopping, or going to school, would become dangerous and life-threatening. Sadly, there are many communities and areas within our world where these types of fears exist, but not because the entire community has abandoned the belief in the body of laws that govern our behavior and conduct. So here you have entire communities that are affected by the choice of a few. You know, and I can tell you there's places in our world today, like all of you right here, some of you walk to the auditorium. You're not worried about someone robbing you on your way up here. You know, you're not worried about, we have a speed limit on the road that is actually set more for people who walk and ride bikes than cars, because you have to protect everyone. And of course, if you're in a car, you're pretty much protected compared to someone walking. And that's the way it's done here at the Peaceful Solution headquarters. Things and care and concern, rules are established to protect those who are most vulnerable. And here in the United States, you would think that you pretty much can go wherever you want to go and it's not that bad. And you tend to think that, well, you know, these other countries, it's if they're walking by themselves down the road, that's where they get robbed. I can tell you, I've been robbed before in another country. And I wasn't by myself. I was in the middle of about 1,000 people when I got robbed. And nobody wanted a part of it. You know, and they pretty much stole $1,200 in 3 seconds. And that's how much one of these cost. Took it out of my hand on the back of a moto and gone. Took all of 3 seconds. And nobody wants to get involved, especially people that live there, because you have to answer for it. There's already the people that rob you are part of it, but there's a whole group of people. They have a whole system set up, and there's people that are watching. And these are places to where recently I had to get from point A to point B. And the only thing they had were motos, and I don't ride on motorcycles. Never have, never been on one in my life, never going to be on one. Just don't care for it. You know, got advice from the author of Peaceful Solution one time, and I've always taken it seriously. And they said, well, you can't walk. Like, why can't you walk? You'll get robbed. I was like, so you're telling me everybody walking down the street's getting robbed? No. Come to find out, nobody in that city really gets robbed. They just think they're going to get robbed. And it's really because it wasn't really a city. It was more of a town, kind of like the one we live in. But people there were respectful of others. A small town. But in the big cities, there's certain cities I wouldn't go walk through at night, because it only takes a few people who are looking to better themselves. And you're talking about people that live in very bad economies, to where these things are called mercy robbings, is one thing they call them. They call them, there's another word they refer to it as, but it's like mercy robbings. In other words, Americans are the prime target, because you can go buy more. We can't. We live in a bad economy. You'll go back to your country and you'll go buy more. For example, if they rob you and they can get your wallet, they'll take your cash, but they leave you with your ID. They won't take your ID or anything that you need. They just take what they want. That's considered kindness. Robbing with kindness is what they called it. Kind of an oxymoron, but that's how they look at it. And it's not that the whole city's like that. All it takes is one person or a few people. And if you're living in a city of 8 million, 100,000, and you have chaos taking place. Well, think about that, and then think about, once again, individualize this about how we affect our community. Because it doesn't take very many people to cause chaos. It doesn't take a lot of people to disturb the safety of others. Continuing on, it says, all it takes is one or two individuals who lack, once again, the regard for the well-being and lives of others for there to be fear, violence, and crime within a community. The following article is a prime example of those individuals. And here we have, just kind of set in the mind of some of our younger people that might not be aware. This took place in 2002. So this was just, 13 months after September 11th, not quite 13 months after it. The climate and the tension in society at that time was extremely high, because here we'd had what was labeled as a terrorist attack just the year before. One in Washington, D.C., or right there in Virginia across the Potomac at the Pentagon. And then, of course, the plane in Pennsylvania, and also the World Trade Centers there in New York State, in New York City. But here it's Wednesday, October the 2nd, 6:04 p.m. Once again, the year was 2002. That was when the first sniper victim, James Dean Martin, 55, of Silver Springs, Maryland, was shot and killed in a grocery store parking lot. And so began 22 days of terror for the residents of Washington, D.C. area, By the next day, October 3rd, 5th, more people were fatally wounded while they went about doing simple tasks such as buying fuel at a gas station, cutting the grass, vacuuming a car, or simply standing on the street. Between October 4th and the 22nd, 7 more people became victims of the sniper. Residents expressed feelings of shock, outrage, and fear as they struggled to live as normal a life as possible, even with the knowledge that going to a grocery store, pumping gas, or walking through a parking lot to your car could be a death sentence. Area school functioned on Code Blue, which meant that children were not allowed to play outside. In other parts of the country, people began to wonder if there would be a copycat version of the crimes, and fear spread throughout our nation. On October 24th, authorities arrested 2 men in connection with the shootings. A total of 13 people had been shot, 10 had been fatally wounded. And once again, when all of this was said and done, and I would encourage the teachers to get information to show, if you have a class that's not familiar with it, which a lot of the younger people, this is 22 years ago, 23 years ago now almost. It's great to show them, not teaching them how it was done, but to show them to see how simple someone can do something to disturb society. Because it did take a lot. I remember the gentleman's name was John Allen Muhammad, and the younger gentleman was Lee Malvo. And Lee Malvo is still in prison in Virginia. In fact, there's an inmate that I talked to that's in the same prison facility with that young man. Not young man anymore. He's an adult now. But he got sentenced to 4 life sentences. And think about that for a second. I'm not here to knock our judicial system, but whenever you commit an act like this, and of course this young man, 17, shouldn't have been with this man to begin with, you start seeing all of these things that shouldn't have took place but did take place. And here you had people that had worked out the trunk of a car where they could shoot people from the trunk of the car. They could lay down the back seat. They had removed the lock on the trunk, and then they had actually bored a hole in another part of the trunk where they could actually shoot through it. And that's why it was so difficult to catch them when they were doing it. And here's a 17-year-old young man that's learning, getting this experience. Tension's already extremely high because of what had taken place. And of course, everyone was worried about the next terrorist attack. It was kind of the same way for the young people here that seeing how COVID affected society. Well, that really affected society when that took place. It was a shock to America, because we're used to seeing that in someone else's soil, but not on American soil. But here you have someone that was John Allen Muhammad. He was sentenced to death, and he was executed. I'm pretty sure it was 2009 is when he was executed. Lethal injection is what he was put to death with. Now, he was put to death, but that didn't fix the 10 lives he took, by the way. It just added another one to it. And then the young man that was there with him, 17 years old, is in prison, still in prison to this day, 4 life sentences. Now, imagine if you tell someone that you're going to sentence them to life 4 times. How many lives do they have? 1 life sentence would have pretty much got him where he needed to go as far as their terminology would have done. But the reason they did that is because they want to make sure he never has an opportunity to even get parole, because in some states at 70 or 67, even if you have a life sentence, you can be paroled. And here's a young man at 17 years old. He was with this other man, which he shouldn't have been with, ruined his whole life. He's going to grow up, and he has grown up, and he's going to be in prison his whole life. Now, my question and this should be your question, to the people that are on the judicial committee that we've met with before. They're still on the committee. One is a senator in Texas, and one is a senator in Iowa. What are we doing to help these people change what got them there? What is prison going to offer them? That's a question that everyone should be asking those who are officiating these facilities. If they have made bad choices, if they've made things come to pass that destroyed the lives of others, that's bad. And you stick them in a prison facility, well, what are you doing to help fix it once you put them there? Because sometimes it's almost like that's the ending of it. And the families, you'll see, they'll leave the courtrooms and, well, justice was served. He's going to be locked away now. That's not the ending. That's the beginning of that person supposed to be rehabilitated. But it's not really a rehabilitation. And think about these things, because once again, we're all interdependent on another. And these facilities, could prison facilities be better? Well, we have teachers that have been to prison, and they could really tell you how to fix them. Turn them into schools. Turn them into places of education. Not educations of how to be a better crook, or educations. I've heard stories from people that actually went to prison for stealing, and when they were in prison, they ran the scams from prison, continued to steal. Prison doesn't stop crime. It's education that can change it. You think about what took place right here in the sniper terrorist shooting in Washington, D.C. And of course, it makes you think of Austin, Texas, what took place back in the 70s. But how many people have been shot to death since then in the United States? It just wasn't a terrorist, they claimed a terrorist. How many people have been shot since then? Thousands of people have been shot. Didn't make the news, didn't make the paper, wasn't a terrorist attack, it wasn't national news, but it's still going on. It hasn't stopped. So putting this one man in prison, putting this one man to death, hasn't stopped anything. Not a thing. Continuing on here, it says in the previous chapter, you learned about the importance of character in the life of every individual. And of course, the last chapter we covered was leadership and your character. It says you also explored the role of character in our leaders and saw how leadership that is immoral can impact others. We're really getting to see that. David talked a lot about this in his last class, and I'm really glad he did, because he brought in a lot of great points about look at your world leaders to see what they're doing. And right now I truly enjoy watching President Trump and President Pietro go at it, because I really want to see what kind of solution they come to when neither one of them are seeking peace. That's the president of Colombia and the president of the United States. And I decided when I was in an area pretty much close to the presidential palace, I went to listen to a speech that was given. And I thought it was very interesting, the ideology that people have on how we're going to make this world better. And imagine someone giving a speech that this was in the papers beforehand, but they gave this speech again. It's building up. They repeat themselves. We're going to improve the economy by legalizing cocaine. It's going to bring enormous taxes into our country. And America, since they've legalized marijuana, it's more dangerous than whiskey. So that is the answer that they have to fixing their economy and becoming better friends with the United States. We're just going to legalize cocaine and tax it now. And I am not joking. I'm not telling you a joke. I didn't just make something up. That is actual conversation taking place on a political level to try to create new laws to generate more money. And the United States is going to have a hard time looking at it and go, that's crazy, because that's exactly what they did with marijuana. That's the only reason it's legal. It prohibits you from learning. It destroys your mind, but yet it's legal because it generates a lot of tax revenue. And that's why it's done that way. And there's other things that we see taking place between world leaders, and you'll always see them, and always listen to this. The author of The Peaceful Solution told me, pay attention to this. Never let this get by you. When all countries speak and they say, well, it's in the United States' interest if we, or if it's in Russia's interest if we, it's in China's interest if we, no one ever says it's in a global interest. It's in the whole world's interest if we. Everybody's always worried about themselves. They're not worried about other people. They're worried about taking advantage of others. And one thing that is very important to learn, we have a very nice life here in the United States. We're spoiled. That's just the way it is. And if you think you're not spoiled, I'll give you some countries to go spend the weekend and you'll find out you're extremely spoiled. But when we have to have our lives the way we have them, when we have to make other countries suffer and live from hand to mouth just so we can get what we want at a price where we can keep spending, that's not truly being very interdependent on each other. That's a one-way street right there, where you live with nothing, I'll live with everything, and you just keep getting by and I'll keep living it up. It's a very unweighed scale that's lopsided. And why is that so bad? Because if you have more and you're getting it easy, it puts in the minds of those that are actually building your product that you're buying for next to nothing that it's okay to steal it. You have everything, we have nothing. So we're going to do whatever we can to cross that border to either enjoy it with you, or we're going to rob every one of you when you come down here. That's just the way it is. And they do it very carefully. You get into a taxi and they'll tell you a price in dollars very quickly, even though they don't ever price things in dollars. but they know Americans are used to paying $40 for a taxi ride. So they'll say $40, when in reality, it should be 40 mil or 40,000 pesos, which is equal to like $6. But if an American will give them $40, that's a day's pay. I can go home now. That's the way they look at it. And they look at it as what's fair because you're used to it. But I want you to really consider how this interdependency that we're talking about, it's not really a level playing field. We have teachers in Nigeria who live on $2 a day. That's what they live on. And they work jobs, by the way. They're working jobs, and they teach the peaceful solution for free. That's what they make over there because their money is so worthless now. We have teachers in Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, Kenya, Somalia, Ghana. All of these people would love to have a minimum wage job like in the United States. That would be a dream for them. But you know what? Their interdependency really relies on us getting them this information for free so they can do what they want to do with this information. And you know what? That requires a lot more teachers, a whole lot more teachers. That's why I'm trying to stress how much other nations really depend on us, because if we put everyone that's sitting in this auditorium teaching right now, we don't have enough people to start teaching classes the way we need to. We need more. And I know there's a lot of people that think, no, I can't teach this. You do it every day. You truly do. You do it with your actions. And it's really not something to where, well, I'm not perfect yet. Well, if it wasn't perfect, we could just shut the camera off and go home because ain't nobody in this auditorium going to be perfect to teach these classes. But it's this interdependency and this, remember back to page 8 of the character unit, this importance of determining right from wrong, positive from negative, and making a choice. And realizing when we make the wrong choice that we can fix it and that we must fix it. Well, continuing on, it says, in this chapter, speaking of chapter 5, you will further explore the effects of negative leadership and how individual choices can affect many others. How we interact, whether we choose to be honest or dishonest, responsible or irresponsible, hinges upon character. And that's something in leadership roles, and I hope everybody gets this. If you're in a leadership role, you have to be honest, especially if you're dealing with other leaders. You can't come in halfway honest. You have to be completely honest. And when we're dealing with other nations, you have to be completely honest. I don't mean brutally honest, completely honest. If you're dealing with fixing situations, you have to be honest about the whole situation. Otherwise, it's perceived and it is negative character. If you truly want to fix a problem, if we want to fix a problem, we have to be honest about what the problem is. And then we have to be open about how do we fix it. And you know what? That's beneficial when you have multiple people to give input on how to fix a problem. Because I've seen situations, and I'm really privileged to have an opportunity to work with some really great people who oversee things. And I've had ideas on how I thought, this would fix this. And I've heard much better ideas in meetings come from other people. And I've learned a lot from that. And, that's something that we have to continue to learn, that as long as we're honest, we keep our goals in sight, and we're looking to establish and fulfill those goals, which is teaching character education, then we're going to be able to accomplish these goals. And if we think that, well, let's just manipulate it a little bit. Psychology has its positive and negative sides, mostly negative, but there is a positive side to it. If you think you have to politicize something a little bit to get your way, just look to Washington, D.C. to see how well it works. Just look to Syria. Look to Russia. Look to Ukraine. Look to China. Look anywhere you want to where they're pulling politics. And if you can tell me that any of those places are working, then I'll agree with you. Otherwise, putting politics into creating solutions doesn't work. And we have a world of politics, which is based on manipulation. And that's what we are not looking to do here at the Peaceful Solution. The Peaceful Solution is more about identifying what the problem is and then fixing it, especially within our society, which we're a part of. And we're also part of the problem sometimes. It says, notice here, you will also explore how character applies to the way nations interact. Qualities such as respect, compassion, and trust are just as important in how nations relate to each other as they are to relationships between individuals. And that's something that sometimes we really have to check ourselves on how lack of respect we might be showing to other people and the lack of compassion we might show to other people. That's really, before we start saying someone else needs to do it, we really should look at ourselves and reevaluate ourselves and bring ourselves into check. And of course, it's easier to look at students and do them, correct them. And it's easier to let students go and don't correct them at all, which I'm very thankful my parents never did me that way. I'm very thankful they corrected me and they pointed out what I was doing was wrong. Otherwise, they were not teaching me. And that's why the Peaceful Solution stresses, with kindness. If you see someone doing something, using a tool wrong, nothing wrong with pointing it out and saying, whoa, wait a minute, you're going to hurt yourself. If you see someone needing a little guidance, nothing wrong with giving it to them. Now, if you see someone doing something wrong and you tear loose on them yelling and screaming, well, you're worse than the person that was doing it wrong. And that's the part about compassion, understanding. There's a difference between having the power to do something and the ability to do something. And the author of The Peaceful Solution used this scenario one time in a speech he gave in a Peaceful Solution conference. I think it was 2010. And he said, many people have the power to do a lot of things. Very few people have the ability to do it. And he used the example of building a house. He said, if you're capable of walking and you're healthy and you can move around, you have the power to do it. But if you don't have the knowledge to do it, you don't have the ability to do it. We have many leaders in our world today. They have the power to lead. They just don't have the ability to lead. Well, that's what we're working and striving to, is we want to have that power and ability, because knowledge is power. And it helps us to be able to do things in a peaceful manner, in a proper way. But you can have all of the power you want. You can know what's right or wrong. And if you just don't do it, you just don't have it what it takes to get it accomplished. And that's really important, because one thing that the Peaceful Solution gives us is the power and ability to accomplish whatever we set our mind to do. Well, continuing on here on page 183, it's one thing leads to another. And it says how we interact with each other and the choices we make have the potential to ripple outward with after effects far greater than the original incident. And you think about, and I'll use the example David gave about his father, and think about, he mentioned that still affected him to this day. And that was many years ago. And that's one situation. And think about how many situations people have been through like that affected them. And each and every one of us probably can think of, probably not things that powerful. That's pretty powerful. That's one of the most powerful things I could really think of that somebody could go through. But all of us have experienced something in our lives that's affected us. And then think about, well, what did we do in our lives that affected other people, whether it's positive or negative? We like to think about the positive, but think about the negative. What have we done with that? And I'm not saying dwell on it, and I'm not saying beat yourself up on it, but if you can identify something that you did that was negative in your life, what have you done, or what are you currently doing to fix or remedy that situation or the actions that led to that? Because if you're fixing whatever it was that caused it, you're heading in the right direction. Doesn't mean you've completely repaired it, but if you're in the process of fixing it, then you're going in the right direction. And as we talked about earlier, it's one step at a time. You don't fix a problem overnight. It doesn't break overnight. You don't fix it overnight. We're not going to fix society overnight, but we're not going to fix society with making threats, applying sanctions, no more than you're going to fix your classroom of yelling at your students, telling them they're stupid, telling them they're ignorant, demoralizing people. Same thing on the workplace. tell someone they're ignorant, tell them they're foolish. You should have known better. Why should they have known better? You know, I remember somebody asking me that one time. When you tell somebody they should know better, explain why they should know better, and then they could probably fix it. Because then you'll have to teach them why they should know better. Just don't tell them they should know better. Go back over the procedure one more time again. And, you know, for me, I'm somebody that what I do, I've been doing a long time in my life. So I'm very familiar with how to do the job I do as far as my profession. But if someone wants to teach me how to do electrical or plumbing or something, they got to show me like a couple times. You know, I'm not a really fast learner with something, you know, it's just got to hear it. You know, I've worked with framing with someone before, and they pretty much have to explain it every time I do it. But they have the patience to do it, and they're a really great teacher at it. And they do it really well. But, you know, I've also worked with people that were not very patient. And I wasn't the person that was being taught. I was just the person handing things back then. Man, I thought, I'm so glad I'm not the person being trained to do this, because that guy got yelled at every day. He got cursed at every day. And it made me, the effect it had on me was I decided to start a business so I would never have to work for somebody like that. And that's why I started my business. I got tired of that. But we can become those people too. And so I really want you thinking about don't think about other people. Think about yourselves and how you're affecting others. If you've done something that's negative, what are you doing to fix it? And if you are in the process of fixing it, you're on the right path. If you've got it sitting in the closet somewhere, or if you're like, that person just needs to stay away from me, I stay away from him, problem's fixed. That's not fixing it. You know, it doesn't work that way. Sooner or later, that person that you don't like, you're going to depend on that person. You're going to have some kind of engaging conversation with that person. And you can think that you're not going to have to, but it always works out where it comes around that we're going to have to show what we've learned. But continuing on here, it says, for example, deliberately taking another's possessions without their consent is stealing. And that's any which way, shape, or form you take them. If you're given responsible for someone's possessions to turn over to someone else and you don't do it, that's stealing. You know, if you are responsible for something you've borrowed and you don't return it, that's a form of stealing. We tend to think that it's sneaking around, grabbing somebody's stuff and running away with it. It's much more than that. When stealing occurs, as in the case of burglary, the ripple effect could be one of fear throughout the entire neighborhood. This one incident could result in everyone taking precautions to ensure that their belongings are safe. This would include buying extra locks, alarm systems, guard dogs, and so on. Many communities start neighborhood watch programs in response to criminal activity or have requested an increase in police patrol in their neighborhood. Conversely, when someone makes a choice to be respectful and considerate to others and their belongings, the result is a positive ripple effect. For example, mutual respect will lead to a bond of trust, unity, and peace. Can you imagine a community where there is no theft? The people who live in this community would have the peace knowing that they could leave their house or cars unlocked. Businesses would sell their merchandise at lower prices because they would not have to compensate for losses due to shoplifting. In this community, fear and mistrust would be virtually non-existent. Does this sound too great to be true? Can such a community exist? The answer is a resounding yes, but only notice and underline that word, the next two words really, and put page 6 of the character unit so you have it. Only if everyone values, they deem this to be important, a positive character, and diligently maintains it. You know, when you think about it, and we talked about it before in the responsibility unit, and I think we mentioned it here previous in this class. Remember the young man standing before the judge, and he said, "But I only did it once." Young man, it only takes one time to become a thief. That's all it takes. And think about this before you do it, before I do it. We should consider this. If we're responsible for something, especially somebody else's property, and we mismanage it, we don't do what we're supposed to do with it, we hold on to it like it's ours, think about how much trust the community loses for a person like that. You know, it's really hard to deal with someone like that. So if you're working with, say, community tools, if you're in a community where everything kind of ties together, be respectful of ownership in every which way, shape, and form, even when it comes down to the property you step a foot on. That way we can always be held blameless for doing anything that would promote negative character, or that would promote anyone saying anything negative about any of us. That way, you know, the peaceful solution can be a shining example to others. Our next class is going to be this coming Wednesday on February the 26th. We're going to be picking back up here on page 183 just briefly. Then we'll continue on to procedure 4 on page 184. And once again, class will be at 5:30 p.m. And to remind everyone, if you have questions or if there's things you can do to help the peaceful solution in your countries, if you speak multiple languages, please email us. You can either send a message through Facebook. You can email us at info@peacefulsolution.org. Go to the website, www.peacefulsolution.org, or email us. And once again, we will get back in touch with you as soon as possible. We will connect you with certified teachers that will help get these classes going in your communities. And if you really want to do it, please contact us, because we're looking forward to working with everyone very soon. Thank you for joining us.